Court does not sit to waste its time. If you have no defense, it chases you.
It is a ruling on the foundations. Business has been conducted in a certain way.
Banks take money from us, depositors. All of us seated here have got money in the bank. And even before you walk out, they've given that money to somebody else.
Deeply incisive.
The law enjoins us to be answerable to the sovereign of the country.
Our members of the force, we have always been demanding officers to be highly disciplined and being accountable to people of Uganda.
Authentically symbolic and insightful.
We should work so hard to evacuate this power.
Behind the Headlines, every Wednesday at 10 p.m. with Charles ODONGTHO.
A very welcome.
Probably the most experienced talk show moderator in Uganda, with a team of illustrious panelists. Honorable Margaret Mohanga, a veteran journalist, legislator, entrepreneur and development consultant, and Ramadan Gobi, an economist and university don.
I've really got perturbed that in Uganda we are building parties with no membership subscription.
All on your public broadcaster, UBC, inspiring Uganda.
A very warm welcome this evening. The 5th of May 2021, this Wednesday. My name is Charles ODONGTHO, your host, and welcome to Behind the Headlines. The panel is fully, just by a little percentage short, but constituted, and the discussion has to start. But let me start from the extreme left. Dr. Lugalambi. Dr. Lugalambi, George is a media consultant. He trains and teaches journalism, if you like. And he is here with us on his maiden appearance. Doctor, you're most welcome to this show.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you outside the classroom. Next to Dr. Lugalambi is a man who is returning not for the first time, but he is a veteran journalist, Andrew Mujuni Mwenda. He is the CEO of the Independent News Magazine, old man of the clan. If I don't call you old man of the clan,
I'll go on hunger strike.
But which
no,
clan?
I don't want you to go on a hunger strike.
Which clan?
I'm happy to see you, Mwenda.
Sarah is asking which clan, and I'm telling her it's African clan. All of us Africans are one clan. Whether in Africa, Asia, or the Caribbean, or Latin America, or North America, we are all one clan. And I am the old man of that entire black race clan.
Andrew, it's good that you and I survived the COVID, and I'm happy to see you back. Please, in...
Charles, don't put yourself in my league. For you, you were in bed for 2 weeks dying. Me, I was asymptomatic, running 10 kilometers a day. So when COVID came into my body, it was so badly beaten, it escaped from this country for 2 months or 3 months.
So you are like Trump, who said the amount of negative that they have detected in my body has never been seen before. Your amount of asymptomatic had never been seen before.
Yes, my asymptomism was will go right into the textbooks. Right into the textbooks.
Next to Mwenda is Council Sarah Birete. I must get the organization right. She is the executive director for Center for Constitutional Governance, CCG. You're most welcome back to the show.
And also a radical activist, you must add.
We will not discuss that because that is your subjective opinion. Next to Sarah is teacher or lecturer Ramadan Gobi. He teaches economics at MOBS. Good to see you.
Thank you.
We will discuss other things later. Finally, on my immediate left is the Honorable Abdul Katuntu, fresh from winning an election, because he's just making a comeback. He is a lost not son of this show, but a man of this show. You're most welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you, Charles.
From Bugweri.
Thank you, and I'm happy to be back.
Good to see you back.
Thank you.
Good. Gentlemen and lady, we are going to be discussing one major topic. We are going to be looking at the 2021 commemoration of World Press Freedom, which was celebrated on Monday. But towards the last 30 or 40 minutes, we will be touching on the next government coming in place next Wednesday. By the time we get back to the show next Wednesday, President Museveni will have been sworn in the morning on that day. I don't know as which number, the presidency, but we will be touching on that very briefly. This year's World Press Freedom Day was celebrated under the theme Information as a Public Good. And I participated in a number of the discussions, Dr. George, the Honorable Abdul Katuntu, and many of you here, constituted. But many people are asking, what does this exactly mean when they say information as a public good? Dr. Lugalambi, in 1 minute, what would that mean exactly when they say information as a public good? And can Uganda have that?
Well, I think it's, I mean, if you look at information and you think about, public assets, if you're talking about information as a public good, you're pretty much talking about it as a public asset. And it wouldn't actually be a new thing to think about it as a public good, because if we think about, all other public assets, that we have, that we want to have access to and we expect to have access to, information, I think, is rising to that level. If you think about, the government's fourth industrial, revolution strategy, if you think about the e-government strategy, if you think about, the plans, for digital transformation, for the digital economy, fundamentally, I think all these, are operating on the basis, of anticipated access to information. So, if you're talking about information as a public good, we expect, that this is a resource that should be inclusive, that all citizens really, to be able to function, as citizens, democratically, economically, you want them to have, access to information. So I think it's really in that context that we are looking at information.
And if it is not new, then why was it made such a big issue that this is what the world should discuss this year?
I think it's largely because of the kind of challenges that I think we have started now experiencing. The growth of internet companies and the kind of power, for instance, that they have on information, on accessing platforms. Our realization really that as governments consolidate power, as they are being challenged from all corners, they are realizing that they have to be fighting information wars as well. So beyond, beyond the policy realm, beyond, discussions around policy and what we need to do to build economies, I think it's clear that that information is very much a very critical resource in as far as advancing economies, obviously, but as well, in consolidating power.
Good, Andrew, you are a purveyor of information on a daily basis, a consumer of, an active consumer of information. Do you think that, what would you think about this theme? And is it relevant to our landscape here, as far as media and that freedom is concerned, to have information considered as a public view and recognized as such?
First of all, I would not call information a public good. I would call it a public service, in the sense that a good is a tangible physical product. A service is something that is non-tangible. So the difference between goods and services is that goods are tangible, like this chair. Services are intangible, like airtime, you can't touch it. And information, you can't touch it. And why is it a public good? Well, we need first to define what is a public good. A public good and a public service is that which you cannot easily exclude people from using. A private good, like my home, not everybody can come and live there. You know, I saw you driving a nice car. That's a private good. You can drive it on your own. But you can imagine whoever has a television at home will sit and watch this program, and they can learn without them having to be charged or excluded from enjoyment of this service. So to that degree, information is a public service. Even though it may not be provided by government, it may be provided by private actors. The same applies, by the way, to a book. It is a public service that you get because all you need is to buy a book. Just imagine the author of the book may spend 5-10 years doing research and produces a lot of knowledge. But once that knowledge is out there, and for them it may have cost them a fortune in terms of time and money to produce it, but you just need to pay $20 or $50 to buy the book, and then you have access to it. So it's no longer, it cannot be, others cannot be excluded from its use. It's like a road. You know, once the government builds a road, all of us can jump onto that road and use it. So what I cannot understand is why they said this theme is information as a public, they say good, but I would have said information as a public service, because information, especially through mass media, has always actually been a public service. And the diffusion of knowledge, which is of course information, is an important factor in creating an enlightened and skilled population and a much more productive population. Okay, again, I would put them in qualifiers depending on context.
So in the Ugandan context, arising from where you're coming from, do you think that this thinking is a thinking that we should pursue? Should government even think of it that way?
Well, I think that the framers of this debate were looking at only one aspect of the issue of the challenge we face with information. Remember that information is not monolithic. It is heterogeneous. For example, there is something called fake news out there.
Right.
And if you go to social media today, it has become, I think, one of the most dominant aspects of information. And I think that fake news is not a public good, it's a public bad. Why is it a public bad or a public danger? If you spread wrong information, you can produce wrong outcomes. You have seen the kind of information that was spread in the circles of the right wing in America that led to an attack on the Capitol. Perhaps Americans are now beginning to realize that certain forms of information and certain forms of free expression may not always be good, and they can be injurious even to the public good. So when we talk about freedom of information, when we talk about freedom of the press, when we talk about freedom of journalism, we must be very clear what kind of journalism are we talking about. Because the journalism we assume to be happening is that we have ethics in journalism. We are told that we should be truthful and accurate, we should be fair and balanced, we should provide context, we should do, there are so many other principles of journalism. So when you go to social media today, and which is beginning to infect mainstream media, it's not yet happening in Uganda to the degree it is happening in America, because if you follow channels like Fox News, actually the idea of fact is rapidly disappearing, and fake information or false information has become the norm. And we should ask ourselves, and they have, it has also led, you see it on social media in Uganda, it has led to the development of a large constituency of young people or social groups that are anti-fact, anti-evidence, anti-statistics, anti-intellectual. So depending on what kind of information a particular society consumes, you can actually have the right to information leading to the creation of a public bad. I should also, by the way, add that in mainstream economics, the level of what we call human capital of a country, the main proxy for human capital is the years, the average years, the years an average person has spent, the average years a citizen has spent in school. It is the biggest proxy, by the way, they use for human capital. But just look at the kind of human capital we are creating in Uganda, which is the access to information through education, through mass media, through publishing and broadcasting. The thing is that a lot of the information you get is creating a large section of people in society who believe that they should not do anything, that their lives are a responsibility of the state, that what you need is a nanny state to take care of you, to look after you, to babysit you, to get you a job, to get you a wife, then to buy you food at home. That the creation of such a dysfunctional mentality is actually a form of negative human capital.
Okay.
Because you need human capital to tell people that your life is your responsibility, and that if you can use your talents very well, if you can use the attributes and the assets that you have, like, you know, just 1 second, Charles, if you go on social media, you can go there to hurl insults and abuses at somebody. What does it give you? But if you go on social media to create networks, what we call social capital, friendships and things like that, that can connect you to jobs and businesses and other opportunities, it is productive. So the question is, what kind of human capital are you developing? What kind of information are you consuming? And what kind of society are they creating? So this is a double-edged sword. When we talk of freedom of information, we must be very clear what kind of information are we trying to promote. Not all information is good for society.
Good. Sarah, you in your work, you speak a lot of constitutionalism, you speak a lot of freedoms, you speak a lot about these values of human rights and all that. And information is now one of those, access to information is one of those recent rights. Are they called the third generation rights under human rights? But as Andrew says, not all information is good. And now there is this discussion that information is a public good. Where should we really draw the line? Should that line be seen?
Yeah, Charles, thank you. I think information becomes a public good, which means it needs public support. And I think that is the relevance of this theme, because we all know that information is a public good, but you would ask yourself, why 30 years after that declaration in Namibia that established the World Freedom Day, why now? If you look at the role information and journalism has played in sensitizing people, global citizens, about COVID pandemic, you know, we all learned about COVID from media outlets. We all saw what countries were experiencing from TV, from news. And we all received information on how to prevent COVID, you know, from news. When everybody was under lockdown, you know, media, journalists were classified as essential workers. And I think you did 80% of the work to prevent the spread of COVID globally. In this country, it could be more. We were all glued to our TVs to see what's happening and what we need to do and who can go where. You know, it was the only channel of communication other than social media and trying to say hello to one another. So I think that's what caused the realization that we need to treat information as a public good and support. Where the support comes in, Charles, before COVID, just about 10% of radios in Uganda were profitable. And we have about 310 radio stations in this country. 70 of the 310 radio stations are based in Kampala. And we know that Kampala controls 80% of our economy. I will not labor much into economy. The economic guru is here. So if you have 70 radio stations based in Kampala, a capital state that controls 80% of our national economy, the question you need to ask is, how are the rural media outlets surviving? Do the people in the rural outlets have advertising capacity? Does government take, you know, we know government is the biggest spender. Does it take advertising, you know, work to these rural networks? We know journalists, there are very few journalists who are on payrolls in our media houses. You know, the viability of the media sector vis-a-vis the role it plays. Should it be supported? Should it be abandoned? And even, you know, amidst the internet and social media, still journalism has an outstanding role of producing and disseminating verified and authentic information. So how do they get supported to keep playing this important and enormous role to impart information, to enable people, citizens, to seek and receive information?
But doesn't that become the backbone, or actually the crux now of the discussion, that if you say verifiable, you know, quality information, then you are going, someone is going to say, who is supposed to define verifiable? Who is supposed to define, you know, fact in information? And then you are going to say, if government, because I guess you mean, when you are saying public support, you are meaning with the taxpayers money. Now, how do we even go up to now that stage? How do we go to that next stage?
Yes, yeah, you know, government money is one way of supporting media to make it a viable sector. There are many other ways. I think the media needs to recreate its economic models. Because I'm glad the main actors are here. I am just, you know, looking into the media sector from the outside. And I know that the economic viability challenge in the media sector is very live, and I think we need to discuss it. Let me take an example of the 70%, the 70 radio stations based in Kampala. If they need to collect news countrywide, they incur more operational costs. Then you have the rural radio stations, which are the majority, and they don't have income like the ones in Kampala. They also incur operational costs to gather news countrywide. So what if there was a collaborative way of sharing information within the media to minimize operational costs? What if there was a systematic way of partnering with, for example, us civil society who do advocacy and we need to communicate to the people, or looking at agencies involved in behavior change campaigns, and those are things that can increase the economic viability of media, as well as is the work of every other person that is seeking to reach the people. The recent report by Twaweza on sources of information for citizens, especially on media, 72% of Ugandans still get radio as source of information. And I think TV is 9%. Internet, which we are blaming for fake news, is 1.6%, as a source of information. Newspapers follow. After radio, TV, you have newspapers. So still, you have ethical professional journalism controlling information and still being relied on as authentic source of reliable information.
Okay. Mr. Gobi, there is a school of thought, especially by, you know, pundits who are pushing for this argument of information as a public source, that one of the reasons for which information should be made a public good is that you leave it in the hands of the free market, then it will only be favorable, or it will only favor people, the haves, the educated like you in this room, the rich, that kind of class, and you will leave the bulk of the poor like we have in our society. Do you agree with that school of thought? What should be the best approach to handling information?
Thank you, Charles. And I think on top of what Andrew said, to define public good as being non-excludable, you know, this is pure public sector economics, which I've enjoyed teaching in the last decade or so. A public good should also be non-rival in consumption. Non-rivalry means there's no competition in consuming a public good. Like the air we are breathing here. It's a public good. There's no competition in breathing it. No matter the size of the nose of someone, even if you scoop in a lot of it, you can't suffocate me. I will also have enough air to breathe. So
like
whoever,
the roads.
Absolutely. So whoever brought this theme was very thoughtful in terms of information. It should be non-rival in consumption, and that means that there must have been something which informed whoever brought it up. And I think, number one, the traditional media, the mass media, as we knew it, and its traditional model, the journalism model, because of the threat of the new media, it seems to have ceded ground, and it's now moving away from the idea of getting information which is verified and therefore fit for consumption. It's like a road with the potholes or without marks can cease to be a public good, because now you are competing. You see someone now driving to your side to avoid the other pothole, like we are driving in Kampala these days. You may find someone is zigzagging in the road. Actually, these days when you find someone driving in a straight line, be scared a bit. You could be a drunkard, because now we need to maneuver.
It's now the reverse.
The potholes. It's the reverse. So in that way, the roads in Kampala are no longer public good, for example, now, because there is competition in using them. And you find a lot of traffic jam. A public good is where there is non-rivalry in consumption. Now, the traditional media has, because of that threat I've said, that now the new media has emerged, it has started to limit access to information in a way that you find that there is a lot of now demand for subscription to access the traditional, the mainstream, the elite media. Globally now, you can't access certain papers, for example. You can't easily access The Economist, you can't access the news of the world, of this world, and so many others, which we used just to click and access. At one time, actually, these papers, they used to give them out free, because that's not where they were making their money. They were making their money in advertisement. But now, with the emergence of the trend setters on the internet and so on, I don't know which name they are calling them, influencers. And these are the non-traditional outlets on the internet. There is now need to sell the paper, to sell the story in order to make money. So at the end of the day, you find that information is increasingly becoming a private good. If you don't have money, you will not access quality journalism. And this is a threat. You also find the same is happening with the cable televisions. If you want to access cable television so that you can have access to global news, or even our national television, to link you to global kind of activities, it has to pay a lot of money. And that is now reducing the space for public good. So you find that people have started to create their own sources of information. And this is a threat to the traditional journalism. It's a threat to the traditional doctrines of journalism. Andrew was talking of the principles, but there are the three fundamental doctrines. The first one is the access doctrine, that we should have access to good information, unabated, when there is no competition in it, and also when there is no excludability in it. But now we have classes of people who can access particular type of information. Abdu sometimes can come and tell you there is something which is happening because he has access to cable television. But the other one is being fed the other person in the lower market is being fed on misinformation. Actually, Andrew was saying that when the information is not verified or is not, it's not public, it's not a good, but it's a public bad. No, every information is actually a public good.
Every information?
Every information is a public good. When it's not...
Even bad?
When it is bad, then it's not information. It is misinformation.
Okay.
You get it? It's misinformation. So the access doctrine is very, very critical, and it's no longer being adhered to.
And the other two doctrines?
The fairness doctrine.
The fairness. Access, fairness, and?
And the right, the public right to know doctrine, which is actually anchored in the Article 19, I think, of the Universal Declarations of Human Rights.
Is that the one which is our Article 29? Our Article 29 of the Constitution.
It should have been actually also Article 19. But what I'm saying is...
No, it was meant to be in the... It was supposed to be in the Chapter 4, and our Chapter 4 starts in Article 20. So it wouldn't have been in Chapter 3.
I understand. I was just kidding. So you find those three, go and interrogate them. Do these media outlets now still adhering to them? Do they allow universal access? Do they allow the public right to know? And also the government itself? And also the fairness doctrine? Are they listening to people of all sides, of all viewpoints? Because today we are having opinion stars now.
Which is not bad.
No, let me tell you, it's not bad, but somehow it limits the kind of fairness you would want in a society.
But when you talk about the three doctrines, fairness is not qualified. It's not subjective. I think it is objective fairness.
Yeah. It actually came from, it became a very important doctrine when I was reading. You know, sometimes I also venture into these things, because somewhere I talk to people about them. It started with this controversy of cigarette smoking. Televisions used to publicize cigarette, advertise cigarette. You know, you smoke and you feel good, and people were now getting to smoking as a fashion. And in America, I think in 1940s, 50s, they started now a campaign that if you're going to advertise cigarette, you must also show the other side of the store of cigarette. The bad
side of it. Okay.
And that's where the fairness of it came. So, to me, in a conclusion of this, I would think that, yes, we need to go back and really redefine the role of mass media. And how do we support it not to die off? Because this thing we are excited with called social media, it is chaos. Okay. It's just misinformation. It's not information, in my view.
Honorable Katuntu, you, some good years ago, you moved what became a Wonder Act. You moved that bill, the Access to Information Bill, which became an act. I don't know to what extent now it has been implemented really by government and all of us honoring it. But when you look at it with the hindsight benefit, do you think that that was a good, you know, model for this kind of, the quality of information we are looking out for the public to build Uganda, to, you know, contribute towards building Uganda as a democracy?
Well, I've heard from the journalists, from the economists,
and the lawyer, fellow lawyer,
and my colleague, the lawyer. Maybe let me put some legal aspect to this information and public good. When you look at our Constitution, Chapter 4, it catalogues what you would consider fundamental rights and freedoms. And one of them, under Article 41, is access to information.
Yeah.
So it is a fundamental right and freedom of communities in this country. How do you access this fundamental right? Like any other. 2, how do you enjoy it? How do you protect it? Because when you talk about information as a public good, we need to put it in context. This was the World Press Day. And the press, by its very nature, should be informative, to tell the public what is going on. Information is knowledge. Knowledge is power. The worst that can happen to any society is to have a press which is ignorant, to have a press which is fake. Because they, and I'll give you an example. I said it the other day when you people were giving me that word about Access to Information Act. There is a newspaper, big story. Parliament votes for 420 billion in travel. And the entire budget of Parliament is 830.
So 50%.
Literally meaning that the entire, that includes wage, non-wage, and development. But that is the headline. That is the headline of what you would think is a credible newspaper. And what does it take for you to get the accurate information? If you're a professional journalist, if you're a credible newspaper. That's why at that time, together with colleagues who happened to be journalists actually, young boys at that time, I was actually young too because that was my first term in Parliament.
Yes.
In 2004.
Charles and Angelo.
Charles Mangusha Mpaji and Angelo. We came together and they looked for somebody they can relate with who can bring up a private member's bill for purposes of the press taking advantage of that legal regime to access information which was in the hands of the state. So that is actually the heroes of that bill is Charles Mangusha and Angelo Zama. Why? Because they needed it. Those were serious journalists, really, that crop of journalists who cannot get a pen to write something except when they were sure. And at that time we were chasing a project about the oil and gas sector because a few things had started happening in that sector and information was secret. So we wanted to open it up for public discourse. We wanted to open up to the press, but there was no way at that time you would cite the Constitution and say the Constitution allows us to get access to this information. But there was no enabling law. So we thought we need to operationalize Article 41 and have an enabling law for journalists or even academics like my brother here, Ramadan and Dr. Rugalan, to use and pick information which is in the custody of the state. And that is what we call a public good. And it really is about the press. Do you think feeding us with correct information is a right to us as a public? Or it's about you in your, you call them what, editorial rooms? You sit and get a pen and say, what will I do today? So you get, you go to your keyboard and type out something and tomorrow you are feeding us. Is that a public good? Is that the public good we are talking about? So I thought this was a challenge to the press, that we need information, and even the state should be able to provide this information, and we feed the public with accurate information. That's what I think is a public good.
Yeah, okay. Gentlemen and lady, feel free now to interact on the subject, but I will be picking out any of you to ask a specific follow-up question, but feel free to interject where you think you should. Coming back to Andrew, you ran, I think it was Councillor Sarah, who referred, or Gobi actually, who referred to the, you know, the interruptions in the non-advertising style or business model of newspapers and the media generally, which has been affected. How difficult do you find it to construct your information for the public? You are also a business and you have bills to pay, and you must meet those bills, but then you are also thinking of quality to do, but you also have to break the story. How difficult do you find juggling those dynamics?
Well, I think that human life, in all its aspects, is lived through a series of trade-offs. If you don't have a trade-off in the decisions that you make, you are likely to be a dangerous person. All power or a dangerous institution. The second thing I think is that all power that is unrestrained becomes arbitrary power, and all arbitrary power is dangerous power. So if you ask me, one of the reasons I am hostile, let me not say hostile, perhaps that's a strong word, I am skeptical about the kind of NGOs we have in Uganda, is that I have an NGO in Uganda promoting a particular public good. It could be against corruption, it could be against so many other things. But the beneficiaries of this NGO are not members of the NGO. So what they receive from the NGO are not rights, they receive charity. The NGO is funded by somebody in Washington, D.C. and Brussels and London to do work here. Such an organization is likely to hold an ideal, a particular ideal, in its absolute form, and try to pursue it without consideration of the kinds of negotiations and compromise that constitute a democratic society. So let me come to a newspaper. If a newspaper did not have any restraints on it, whether from the market of advertisers or the market of readers, such a newspaper, let me say it is even funded by Open Society Institute, and it is therefore not accountable to anybody. It would have to exercise, it would therefore exercise what I would call arbitrary power, which is dangerous power. So what happens in the mainstream business of news media? For us in news media, our primary audience are our readers, our listeners, and our viewers. Once we capture those, then we leverage them to secure advertising. For us, therefore, to manage a media house sustainably, we must reconcile oftentimes the conflicting interests of, say, our audiences and our advertisers, who are also audiences. So our listeners, our viewers, our readers with our advertisers. But we must also reconcile the interests of the state, the interests of other stakeholders, the community, and all its values. And so it is in creating a balance, establishing a creative balance between conflicting interests and groups. Remember that freedom in its very nature, by the way, is freedom is also competitive in the sense that the exercise of one freedom may deny another person another form of freedom. So managing a society is choosing between different forms of freedom, which to privilege and which not to privilege. So I don't think it's bad for advertisers to have influence on your newspaper, because they bring the necessary balance that you need. The newspaper must take care of business interests, must take care of the public interest, must take care of state interest, must take care of the interests of the church. There was a time New Vision did something and Mengo said, we are going to boycott you. And Robert Kapshenga, who was a CEO, spent a lot of time getting involved with Mengo and doing many things with them that Kabaka has run to ensure that they, as a community, as Baganda, do not feel alienated. It is very easy for you to say, for us, we are a newspaper.
There are some people who are watching you and they didn't know that context. Why don't you tell them what had happened?
Now you can explain that. Because I don't want to lose my train of thought. So I got the sense that that is a part and parcel of the necessary trade-offs that you make. Because you can say, for us, we are right to information. Then you publish stuff that is harmful to a particular community. It could be a tribe, it could be a religion, it could be something. And you become insensitive to certain different constituencies. And how do you get restrained? The only way Mengo could respond is to say, okay, we are going to appeal to Baganda to stop reading New Vision, which boycott was becoming successful, and Robert Kapshenga had to go back and relate to. Now, of course, I must add that in doing this, you must always be careful not to, you can compromise on programs and whatever, but you cannot compromise on your core principles. So you must do it in such a way that you do not undermine the foundational values that make you that newspaper.
Okay. Doctor, Andrew is bringing in now compromises. And for me, I want to introduce the element of motive or even the interest, the business interest, which is what really causes the suspicion or the fear in people who think that information should be a public good, because they fear that the free market adherents might only think of their interest, business, profit, and not so much educating people or even informing people. As a scholar and as a teacher, where do you strike the balance? Must we as publishers, as broadcasters, pander to the market, or we must keep, come what may, by the public interest?
I think those balances are very critical, and I think the reason, you know, we train journalists is particularly to train them to understand why those balances are very important, why those restraints are very important. The whole process of training is to train editorial judgment. You know, that you have a story, a source has approached you of a particular issue, and you question the motive. That's why actually we say in journalism that even when your mother says, "I love you," investigate, because you don't take anything at face value, you know. And the whole idea why we are talking about information as a public good for this theme is we are talking about, you know, verified information. Because, you know, the kind of information society we live in, you know, the role that information plays, you know, in driving economies, in driving pretty much driving our society, we pretty much have, it's become an epidemic. That's why we talk about the infodemic. That means that there is such a proliferation of information, and information has become so disaggregated in the sense that you have, you know, fake news, you have, you know, disinformation. You know, that is the information that is deliberately designed actually to misinform. You have misinformation, which may not necessarily be deliberately designed to, you know, to give false information, but it could be, you know, errors of commission or omission or lapses, you know, that cause that kind of misinformation. So we have this kind of infodemic, which we have to deal with, and within that landscape, you know, that's why you have the false news, the fake news, and so on and so forth. So the whole idea of you know, training journalists and training professional information managers is to train them to be able to make those judgments. You know, sometimes the training goes into, you know, philosophical foundations of journalism, philosophical foundations of the information profession, in all these different, you know, areas of practice, so that people can actually understand that, you know, putting out information, you have to look at the consequences, because there are consequences of putting out information. If you put out a tweet, you know, as a journalist, you have to look very carefully, because if you're a journalist like Andrew, you have a profile as an individual, but you also have a profile as an information producer. And so you don't want to put your consumer or your audience in a situation where they can't exactly figure out, are you tweeting or Facebooking as who exactly? They need to be able to understand. And so those are some of the debates that you know, that we are having in media circles, that you know, how do you distinguish your persona as a journalist when you're tweeting? You know, if you're tweeting as you know, from whatever social network perhaps you are targeting with your tweet, are you thinking about, you know, and your audience and how they are likely to interpret, you know, what you're talking about? So training and then the whole process of professionalization, you know, as we talk about, you know, many journalists don't want the whole idea of being treated like, you know, like lawyers, like doctors in that strict professional sense. But we have a lot of debate about professionalization. How do we professionalize journalism? And the whole distinction between, you know, legacy or mainstream media, you know, that has structures and processes of processing information to ensure that, you know, quality information comes out, and it goes through a sieve of a whole editorial structure and editorial processes to ensure that you get, you know, quality information.
See a danger with the social media currently, that because there is a little bit of competition between mainstream media and social media, you are now bypassing some of those processes.
Right, absolutely.
You know, there is a story out on phones and people are reading, and you want also to immediately become part and relevant to the story going on, and your editors are not doing what they are supposed to be doing. So you end up either on a radio or a television, sometimes even print media. You put out something there which has not properly been processed like it should be.
Yeah. And also additionally, you know, we are now dealing, the reality that we are now dealing with is that while you talk of training, which is for Andrew, for myself, in mass communication class, which is the professional path, I am now, as a journalist now, I am competing with a certain, what is this guy who is very famous? Lumbuya? Some Lumbuya person. And he is just sitting here, he can even hide somewhere behind a tree, and he just gets some picture from Chad or wherever and posts and claim it is from Wobblins.
Actually,
and you are now competing with that person for the market.
Right. The challenge the media and the democratic government today faces is traditional media were always had gatekeepers. If you wrote a story or an opinion, it had to go through an editor, a sub-editor, and so many other people who would have to approve it. Now, if you look at many studies about information, they say if somebody is writing something and knows that for it to be published, it will be subjected to a peer review. Somebody is going to review the work. The tendency is for them to exercise a high degree of maturity, restraint, caution, but better intellectual depth, greater intellectual depth. It is a series, piles and piles of studies have been done on that. Whenever you are writing and you know that for what you have done to be published, it will need approval from some expert or gatekeeper, people will tend to be more balanced. People will tend to try to be deeper in what they are saying and things like that. Yeah. But when a person is writing and they are sure there is not going to be any gatekeeper, no restraint, their quality of their intellect declines, their restraints and qualifiers go down, and then it is ghettoized, their communication. Now, historically, liberal democracies depended on mass media, where the production information had gatekeepers. So there was it, and then those institutions also had values, norms, habits, principles, and traditions that they tried to uphold. So information was better sieved. With the coming of social media, and which is the challenge of democracy, is that anybody with a phone, a smartphone, if they have a microphone, they have already a radio station. On YouTube, you can establish your own channel and put your information there. On Facebook, you can have your own account and you can run your TV, newspaper, or radio, whatever you want. Where there is nobody constraining you. So what you enter there is uncivilized information, insults, abuses, low intellect stuff, and whether this will allow democracy to function as we traditionally have known, we don't know. But the only laboratory of human experience is history. The first experiment in direct democracy was in Athens. Say, after the reforms of Solon and Cleisthenes, that is between 594 BC to about 460 BC.
That's the year you were born?
Yes.
As an old man.
So, under the reforms of Cleisthenes, they established what you would call really direct democracy. Every citizen could go to the assembly and debate and make a decision. But you know what happened to Athens? Because Athens finally fell apart, was defeated by Sparta, although it was much more powerful and richer, because, and you see philosophers like Socrates become very critical of democracy, calling it government by a debating society. Now, Plato was a student of Socrates. When Socrates was killed, again by democratic assembly, philosophers like Anaxagoras were chased out of Athens, their books burnt. By the way, not by dictators, but the Democrats, the mobs.
People who called themselves Democrats.
What you would call really today mobs. So what happened in Athens, somebody needs to read Plato's Republic. That's why you see Plato now begins recommending a government by dictators, because they get fed up with the democracy. We are seeing it in the US under Trump, the kind of instability democracy has created in the United States. You could see the kind of democracy that Pontius Pilate tried to exercise. So Jesus was convicted to death by actually Democratic Assembly, although the judge, who was Pontius Pilate, said, this man is innocent, but the mob was saying, crucify him.
But that was a mob justice.
But that's why I'm saying that you see on social media what you have
is a mob justice.
Is are mobs. You don't have institutions that are managing the production and dissemination of information. It is free for all.
Okay, so we need then, okay, Sarah, you want, I need these professors then to tell us what should be the way forward in that kind of, can I call it a mess, confusion, where now you have unprofessional, as we know them, we professionals call them unprofessionals, but the public out there actually yearns for them. Now, in that confusion, where should be the solution to that mess? Sarah, I want you to make your point. You were raising your hand.
Yes, no. After Andrew's submission and the distortion by technology, we know that every step has positives and negatives. There's a book by Martin Moore, Democracy Hacked. How technology is destabilizing global politics. And we have also witnessed examples like the Cambridge Analytica and use of algorithm and arrest on, profiling users on social media and using them for targeted campaigning or advertising. So I think
the book is by
Moore, just a minute, by Martin Moore. Democracy Hacked. M-O-O-R-E. Yeah. So I think what the world needs, nobody can reverse the digital revolution. There are advantages accruing from the digital revolution, but there are also disadvantages, like for every other, process or step. In terms of information, I am comforted by the findings that people don't necessarily take what they read on internet as gospel truth. But what the media, then the mass media needs to do, we know stories now are broken on the internet. If you want to read, you know what's happening everywhere, including we follow main journalists to know what's happening and what they are covering. So the first point of contact now with the news is the internet. But mainstream media needs to go behind the headlines, do more investigative work, verify more, and produce, quality stories.
And that is expensive.
Beyond, yes, but that's what we are talking about. We need to look at the economic viability.
It is expensive, and the public don't want to even buy it.
That's the debate that takes us to the economic viability of media as a public good.
Okay. Good. Let's. I know Ramadan is itching to jump in, but let's go for a quick break. And when we come back, we will be looking at the way forward. Where do we find the meeting line? And then we will shift to our second topic, maybe 20 minutes into the second segment. But let's take that rest now.
We've cut and reduced our MTN Momo withdrawal rates. Now you can withdraw mobile money at the lowest rates. You also get MTN Century Points when you deposit, send, and withdraw MTN mobile money. Visit our Momo agents countrywide and withdraw mobile money at our reduced rates from 1st May 2021. Everywhere you go, MTN.
Ekya COVID-19 kijja kugwa. If we get vaccinated now, Observe social distancing. Wear masks properly. Sanitize or wash your hands with soap and water regularly. Together we can defeat this enemy.
What does it mean to be closer together? It's taking the last bus home for a surprise visit. Closer together is strangers finding a connection. It's bringing home something much more than a box. It's the warmth of home, or the beginning of something new. There's magic in sharing the things that we love, because it's those things that bring us close together.
Welcome back from that break. This is Behind the Headlines, this 5th of May, 2021, and we are discussing the 2021 commemoration of World Press Freedom, and looking at the focus of whether or not information can be a public good. How do the dynamics work? We have got some, I've got a number of messages or questions or comments, but let me pick one or two that stand out. Ivan Okuda says, thanks for the good show, Charles. The panelists are doing a great job. My challenge, though, with the debate on media freedom or the role of the media is that the debate is still tilted towards traditional media institutions, cultures, aspirations, and values. It's not emphatic on the revolutionizing nature of new media and how that has changed our outlook of what constitutes media and information consumption. Traditional media houses today account for the information needs of the minority. Andrew and Dr. George, you will tell us whether that is true. That some of your newspapers today account for the information needs of the minority, at least going by new media statistics. He has not given me the statistics specifically, but that's a good point that we need to start from. Gobi, do you think that the traditional media are losing the ground, and therefore we should not even, like Dr. Lugalambi argues, that there is training, there is professionalization and all this, that we should now start shifting and getting out of that, getting away from that path?
Yeah, to some extent, you need to realize that the public, the world over, seems no longer to care on who's getting it right. They are really now caring on who's getting it first, and fast. First with the IR, and then the first with the AS. And this has brought a very big challenge to the traditional media. That as you are waiting to get it right, someone who's just getting it fast is going to scoop, in the media you say he has scooped you. He's going to get, information is a commodity.
It is
News is a
breaking
commodity.
news.
Absolutely. News is a commodity. Information is a commodity. It's not a product. And that's why actually you see that media is fighting wars with the security forces. Because security forces everywhere in the world, they look at information as a product, as an asset. For the media, it's a commodity. It's getting bad in a few minutes. It's going to get rotten. They want to get it so quite fast and fast. And that, therefore, has brought a challenge in a way that, you know, traditionally, like Andrew reminded me when he talked of the Greeks. The Greeks had also this aspect of what they call the public opinion, public will. But George Washington, who was the first president of the US later, and that's why he built the most vibrant democracy, and perhaps that will become more sustainable, much as it is getting all these threats. He said, and he told Americans when he was leaving, that as long as we want society to work for the good of everybody, make sure that the government puts in place a structure that is going to ensure that that public opinion is enlightened. It's not free for all. It has to be free, but not free for all. That brings in the aspect of regulation. How do you regulate the new media? Regulation is not control. Regulation is ensuring that the rules of the game are adhered to. It's like a football. Here in Africa, in my village there in Butambala, we used to play football without rules. We count ourselves, there's no referee. We say we were 11, we are 11, let us start. You know what that football ended in?
Broken legs.
The ball could go out, and someone would say, no way, it hasn't. He continues and scores. Another on handball, no, we fight. Chaos. Now, we need to start looking at our societies in that format. That much as we want freedom, freedom of press, freedom of expression, and so on, there must be those people who are going to be watching us as we play our free games, that we don't break the rules of the game.
Okay.
And now you find that, I wanted to really hammer this point in this way. Usually, regulation precedes innovation. But these days, innovation now
comes and then
comes first, and the regulation has to catch up, to play catch up. And that's what we have been seeing now. That with the new media, I'm sure the media gurus, they are scratching where do you start and where do you end. And this is what Ivan, I think, is talking about. That we need to start a conversation on how are we going to ensure that the new media is regulated such that it is enlightening instead of just coming in to bring yellow journalism in vogue once again. Because yellow journalism seems to be in vogue again, where we are just sensational, bringing out sensational stories, ideas, headlines. Whoever speaks in a certain way now is the celebrity. Those who are speaking a lot of sense and researched information are not listened to. This brings in your people you were talking about who have now taken over. So how do we ensure that we limit
the
this
new
kind
media
of
is
new media,
regulated,
which is whose main aim is actually to strike public outrage instead of informing?
Okay. Honorable Katuntu.
I think, yes, it says, what it says is correct, but I have a problem with it. You see, if we are talking about a profession, I said these are journalists, they will agree on their minimum standards. Like the lawyers would, like the doctors would, like...
They are going to self-regulate.
Yes. Or even if they don't,
that's what
we will regulate it as society or as government. We know we are regulating this profession. So you've got an act of parliament, you create a council, whether it's a law council, whether it's a media council, whether it is a medical council, you know, to enforce standards. What this new media is full of everybody. somebody is on this so-called social platform and is called the TVO. How do you regulate him? Is he a professional journalist? Who knows him?
And yet the Constitution protects him.
And yet, first of all, you even don't know him as a person. You can't even sue him even if he offends you or defames you. You can't. So how do you regulate
these days on that internet, they put, confirm that you are not a robot.
So you see, that's where the problem is. So if you are talking about regulation, and I don't want to use the word regulation because I was telling it to Charles and Dr. Lugalambi the other day. Once you say regulation, people think there is a policeman to regulate you, to control you, to prohibit you. Whereas if you say we're a profession and we agree that these are the minimum standards for your own profession to be proud of, you see it, you've got like the lawyers who have their own law society, the journalists, you've got your associations or whatever. The other day I saw there is one called, is it the editors something? Editors Guild. Guys who come together.
As the Editors Guild was preparing to be commissioned, to be launched, we saw a number that Uganda Muslim Journalists Association, Uganda Anglican Journalists Association, we already see them.
Yeah, but
so how are you going to regulate all that?
Yeah, but you see, somehow they could be Uganda Muslim something as a journalist association, but they belong to a wider association group or
communities of practice.
Exactly. So I imagine even then we can put them to order and then say, okay, guys, folks, let's do things differently because it's our profession. This new media, the digital media, nobody is accountable to anybody. That's where the big problem is. You see, and somebody calls it insulting and so on. Somebody wakes up in a bad mood and said, who do I insult? And he posts something. And you find, yes, because someone his wife or his husband has annoyed him, and he's there on the, and there is a debate about it and so on. So how do you do it? He's not a journalist. It's a big challenge. It's really a big challenge. So
yes.
Don't look at some of this like we have a journalist who on social media. Yes, you have a few journalists who on social media, but the orthodox media owes us a duty of care. We as consumers. I don't expect a gullible press. I don't.
Okay.
But you find even somebody, you know, he is running a program, a talk show like this, and what comes out and say, is this one a journalist? Is this real and orthodox media? Very irresponsible. So those ones we demand a duty of care.
Okay, Sarah.
I have maybe a question for Honorable Katuntu. You know, as he talked about the need for regulation, which is critical. The Press and Journalists Act, together with the Uganda Communications Act 2013, provide for two important bodies. One is not fully constituted, that's the Media Council, and the other one is non-existent, that's the UCC Tribunal. So, and we are glad, and I think yes, the third one, the National Institute of Journalists. So as we talk about the important role to regulate and make sure there are standards and there are ethics, how about working to reactivate these bodies that the law provides for that do not exist? Since 2013, the tribunal has never been constituted, but every year, the ICT ministry budgets for the tribunal. And Parliament has never checked that. The absence of the tribunal, the presence of an annual budget, and the conflict and issues that happen in the media that don't have a place for redress.
Yeah, I think you're right, and on some extent, I feel guilty. I feel guilty, actually. But I suffered, I was a victim of it. You know, one time I went to court. At that time, there was no law that governs mobile money transactions and so on. And the sort of monies that were on the mobile money platform was, I think, 5 times all the banks combined and so on. And there was no law at all. And the operators of telecom companies were the ones now doing financial services. So it was a public interest litigation. So I went to court. I sued MTN and Airtel and so on. And the judge said, well, you've come here, but since you are complaining against a telecom company governed under the Uganda Communications Act, there should have been a tribunal. So you go to the what? To the tribunal, and that tribunal was not in place. So, but eventually, of course, we had to put a lot of pressure. Now we've come up with an act to govern the mobile money transactions and so on. So yes, I plead guilty. We have a problem, but it's because, yes, Parliament has done a good job, has put those institutions in place by law, and yet they are not there. We even had the Inspectorate of Government Tribunal,
which was not in place.
It was not also in place
and
for
IGG was
for a
taking
very
decisions.
long time.
Uganda
so
is
the Inspectorate became a toothless dog because the
at one
IGG
time it beat, but it beat illegally.
No, it
case.
tried to beat and it got choked. It did. So yes, you're right. But as Parliament is concerned, we put them in what? In place. What we should have done is follow it up, say, wait, we have put this in place, why haven't you implemented the law?
Good. Now, we need to wind up with Andrew and Lugalambi on this in 4 minutes, 2 each. So what, do you two, being prime actors in the media, think that you should keep with the push for self-regulation, or you think that you need help from Parliament to regulate you, especially now amidst the new media proliferation?
In fact, what I foresee is that the regulation of traditional media is going to be extremely difficult when you have social media, because if there are restraints to how I can express myself, why should I accept those restraints when I have a platform where I can go and express myself unlimited? What the world is facing, one, is a challenge of how to handle social media and the impact of social media on democracy. As I've told you, the first experiment in democracy was direct democracy, where every citizen, without any, you know, the current democracy that emerged in the 19th century in the United States, or else you can say the 18th century, 1789, was representative democracy. So instead of every citizen of America going and sitting in an assembly, every able-bodied citizen, now they said, no, you elect members of parliament to go and represent you, so you'll have representatives. And the whole essence of representative government, you can read John Locke, rather John Stuart Mill on representative government, is that actually an MP is not a delegate. He must make decisions based not necessarily on what the voters want, but on what he considers to be right. So democracy in that sense has successfully functioned, if it has been successful, because it was, the participants were not subjected to 100% control of the whims of the masses. If you look at the American Constitution, nothing can be passed unless it is both concurrently agreed between the Senate and the House. The House of Representatives is elected every 2 years, so they can pass anything. But whenever they pass it, it has to go to the Senate. The Senate is elected every 6 years, but this is the trick. Every third of the Senate is elected every 2 years. So at any one time, there are senators who have 2 or rather 4 years to go, or 6 years to go. So because they're far away from the moment, they can afford to make independent decisions. So these checks and the balances, the Americans built them in order to overcome the problems that animated and led to the failure of Athenian democracy. What the founding fathers of America did not anticipate, and the articulators of modern democracy, is that new technologies would come and actually bypass all these gatekeeping roles that existed, and now you have direct democracy. Now there is a wonder, how are we going to manage this? I don't know whether you've been following politics in America. Perhaps the greatest expression of the dysfunction created by everybody having access to media. Even CNN, which we watch here, is international, but you watch CNN in America, it has been heavily adulterated. It has become a shouting match for opinions. At least it is still trying to maintain some degree of factual
responsibility.
Yes.
And
but I think that with time, there is going to be a convergence of television, the mobile phone and social media, so that the television as you see it today will no longer exist, and the television that will exist in the future will even be, I have my phone, I can beam an image onto the wall and watch TV, and this TV will not even be an institution like ours, it will be. But the second thing, based on the studies I have seen, when people of the same opinion are put in one group, the studies show that they will tend to move to the extreme part of their opinion. When people of divergent opinions are put together, people tend to move from the extremes towards the center. The problem with social media is it tends to segment audiences so that people look for only those sites or for those chat groups where their views are shared, common views. So increasingly, because like when you read many people on social media, they live in echo chambers. You hear a lot of information from your friends telling you the same thing, repeating. So they keep moving to the extreme.
Then
that's why you see people
eventually become truth to them.
Well, but that is also why they become extremists, because the ecosystem, you begin to believe, you listen to your own echoes and think that is the view of everybody. So when they go online there, they exhibit extreme anger, and that is the threat to democracy that we need to think about.
Okay, Dr. George, finally on that topic.
So I believe that for media regulation, it's got to be both internal regulation and external regulation, and that is what we call co-regulation.
Okay, co-regulation.
And internal regulation, includes self-regulation, and in fact, even before you get to self-regulation, all these other things, the training, the professionalization, the self-organization, within the media industry itself, all those are part of internal regulation, training in ethics, the practice of ethics, all that is part of internal regulation. And then, of course, then you have the more structured self-regulation, which you can, structure and implement in different ways, through associations and so on and so forth. But you also really need to have a bit of, external regulation, whereby, there is also a little bit of, a system of sanctions, so that a journalist knows, a media practitioner or anybody using a media platform, even that is a digital platform or a social media platform, they also must to have understand that there would be some kind of sanction if you're so reckless, for instance, spreading information that is clearly likely, to undermine, public health and so on and so forth. So I think I would like to see, a debate about and a process about how best can we actually co-regulate by allowing for, internal regulation, including self-regulation, and also a balance with external regulation.
Good, thanks a lot. Edward Seru Chacha says, thanks, Charles, for continuing to shape the discourse. Thanks, Edward. Then he says, it is disconcerting that the media terrain is shifting towards a charged media environment. A charged media environment rise in targeted attacks towards journalists by security. The cost of the story is rising in Uganda. Then he says, maybe Andrew should contextualize the pattern of the deteriorating media landscape beyond the football games with, with the security. Edward, thanks for the message. And then, wow, this one has written a whole composition. I can't read the entire. He says, the media serves purposes, several purposes, from news to entertainment to information to sales and marketing and to teaching. And I believe that all these purposes should be left to prevail with the preferred medium and deterred. The regulator then should categorize the purpose and allocate it a medium. So journalists, teachers, businesses, jokers should do their job, should be left to do their job and have access to relevant media or preferred medium, and each should be held accountable. I think that's what we have been discussing, and but thanks, I think Batamba for that message. We need to shift. We are now into. We have half the hour to go, and we need to shift and touch on a very important news subject, and this being a very good, you know, panel. We need them to touch on a new government is coming into place. Let me call it in inverted commas, a new government on Wednesday.
Yeah, all government, yeah.
Yes, legally, yes, true. On Monday, the cabinet had its last sitting, and that's to, I think that was to dismiss it, so to speak, and then wait for a new cabinet, which will come into place maybe from after Wednesday, and swearing in will be on Wednesday after the Supreme Court confirmed the announced victory of one of the candidates, candidate Museveni Yoweri, on January 14th. Let me start with a senior politician next to me here, Honorable Katuntu. What, in just a bit, the government that is just exiting, and then we are moving into a new one. What's your take of it?
Well, I don't know. What's my take? There is a new government coming in place.
Yes.
Going to be sworn.
Have they performed
next
to
week.
the expiring one? Has it performed to your expectation?
Well, I think, you know, you just don't say performance. That's quite general. If you are talking about performance of any government, you need to look at different sectors.
Yeah.
You know, you need to look at the economy, you need to look at the politics, you need to look at foreign relations, you need to look at so many things. Then you place a mark whether they have achieved or not. For 5 years, there is no way any government can be power for 5 years and it has not had 1 or 2, 3 success. But after that, what have remained as biggest challenges? The political question still is a big challenge in this country. And I think the new government has this as a big responsibility they have to unite the country, to get especially the urban poor back to believe in government again, and to get the younger people believe in government again, because it explains the performance of the Honorable Chagulani. When you look at the Honorable Chagulani's constituency, really is about the urban poor and then the young people. On the issues of infrastructure, yes, you could see there has been a little bit of progress. Yeah, except in Kampala, but not actually in the whole of Kampala. You need to look at the little bit of the outskirts of Kampala and see the road infrastructure, in KCC infrastructure and so on. But
it's the capital of Photos.
I'm talking about Kampala and outskirts. When you go to Rubaga, Kawempe, Najera, and all those places, which roads that used to be actually, you know, Maram and so on. And it has also explained, I think, the growth of the real industry, housing industry in those areas and so on. So there is some progress in that aspect. But the political question still remains a very big challenge for this.
The big one you said, you mentioned disunity.
Yes.
Or lack of unity.
Yes, lack of disunity. And then, of course, security of persons. Soon after the elections, we had the missing and abductions of people and so on, which has remained up to now. It's a very big question which the new government should be able to handle. I don't think we deserve as a country to be compared to the yesteryears of Idi Amin. So and so was kidnapped. You moved around the police stations. Say he's not in any of these. You say maybe he's in this barracks, he's not there, and then you go back to the church and start praying whether you'll come alive. So I think those are the challenges the next government has got to face.
Dr. Lugalambi, unity was it number 4? Was one of the main points, one of the main points of the 10 points program that the president and his team, the former NRA, came to power to to resolve. But now we see that increasingly people are doubting whether that will happen, even if Museveni finishes 40 years by 2026. As an observer, as a journalist, how do you think about that? What must Museveni, the next 5 years of Museveni, do if they can, you know, do something new?
Well, I think the question of really national consensus is very critical, because I think there's so many things that, you know, as Honorable Katuntu says, you know, we are debating certain things that you would have imagined that 35 years plus, you know, would be more or less settled questions, which we seem to have failed to settle. And so I think the different political forces that we have in the country, we don't seem to really have achieved that, you know, minimum political consensus over certain things. And I find that troublesome, and it looks like, you know, it's now becoming a cycle. We are almost, most of the time, the political forces are talking at cross purposes. So I think the onus really is on the president, you know, for the time, the longevity he's been in power, the kind of the goodwill historically he's had. I think we've lost certain opportunities, you know, to build that national consensus, to have that minimum consensus on, you know, what is the best form of politics, you know, that we should have. And I would really expect the president, perhaps, you know, like he's tried to reach out you know, in the past, you know, people have been fighting. There have been all these groups that have been, you know, incorporated and co-opted and found ways actually of reaching out to them. So because I think it's draining, it's really draining for the country, you know, to be having these fights all the time. And because of that, it saps a lot of, you know, energy. And you would really expect that if some of those fundamental questions were settled, and we keep going back to the Constitution and threatening to change things here and there if they don't work for us, if they don't. So there's so much expedient, you know, actions that we take through our political processes that make it, you know, really very difficult to build, you know, the kind of national consensus that we have, and to really have predictability within, you know, our political processes. And so we keep back going to redesign things and change things. But I think it's sapping so much energy that would really have been invested in thinking about, doing the hard thinking about, you know, the policy question that we really need to resolve about the economy especially.
Andrew, do you think that there are some new things that you expect in the next 5 years from the government, the new government?
Please allow me to begin by disagreeing with my grandson, Jojo Grand, just a little bit.
I'm really much older than you.
If Logalambi is your grandson, then what am I?
Great-grandson. Meaning I am the father of your father. So now, you know, I'm almost finishing reading the book, A Promised Land by Obama. You know, what made Obama was a speech he gave at the Democratic Convention of 2004, where he said there is no red America, there is no blue America, there is only the United States of America.
Yeah.
So Obama campaigned on the ticket that he was going to promote bipartisan leadership. He would reach out across the aisle and try to work with Republicans.
Hope, actually, generally.
Yes. By the time Obama left office, America was 10 times more polarized than he found it. Why did Obama fail? I think that sometimes certain processes are beyond the role of leaders. We have discussed your social media. I think that to say Museveni has failed to build a consensus also assumes that the other side was willing to accept his gestures. I personally think that the biggest failure of building a consensus in Uganda is not from Museveni. It is from two key opposition politicians, Kizza Besigye and Bobi Wine. Yes.
Who just came yesterday?
Yes, yes. Bobi Wine and his people power are inheritors of Kizza Besigye's defiance. You see, if you look at FDC as a party, I think that FDC is a moderate, democratically minded liberal party. And many other parties, anti and others, are willing to negotiate. But in Uganda, you have, because of the social media driven polarization, you have a significant section of young people who are angry, virulent, radical. They want to turn tables around. They constitute the most powerful, enthusiastic voice of the opposition. What I have seen as a failure of leadership by Besigye and Bobi Wine is that rather than try to lead this group, they have allowed this group to lead them. I think initially Besigye was calculating that if I go against this group, they will turn against me. And Bobi Wine has confronted the same problem. Because even if Museveni sent an olive branch to Besigye or Bobi Wine, who are the most powerful influences in the opposition, they cannot accept it because they are afraid that their constituency will walk away from them. I actually think that Bobi Wine and Besigye in many ways are not themselves. They are hostages of their base. But in being hostages of their base, they have also failed to grow their appeal. If you are a new person, it is so important to read this election of 2021. It has a lot of data that will teach you a lot. Voter turnout in Kampala fell to 42% or 43%. Voter turnout across Buganda fell from about 61% to 54%. You see, 53%, 53.4%. Across the board, there was such massive decline in voter turnout. And I think it's because you have a large community of Ugandans who are frustrated with Museveni, but they don't accept that the politics we build should be that kind of politics they see in the opposition, the politics of polarization, of hostility, of no compromise, no negotiation. I know Museveni very well, and I think that Museveni is much more open.
You know him?
Very well. Very well.
There are some people
I
who
have
argue
had
that
many conversations with
his
him.
best friends, the late Kategaya and all this, the Right Honorable Amama Mbabazi, all did not realize they did not know him that well.
Well, let me tell you this. I think that he has his own interests, of course, like any other human being, to stay in power and all this, but is much more willing to have a dialogue with the opposition. Of course, Museveni would not enter dialogue as a platform for organizing his political funeral. So we should take it for granted that he does not want the dialogue to lead to him losing power. But you see, Museveni is transient. First of all, we as elites of Uganda, we have made Museveni the issue. I can tell you Museveni is not the problem of Uganda. The problems of Uganda are much deeper. We can change the next 20 presidents and we'll still be this roundabout. So it is important for people in the opposition to understand that and transcend Museveni as an individual and say, what is the Uganda we want? In any case, Museveni is 76. I don't think he has the next 100 years to live. So he's a passing cloud in the politics and history of Uganda. So if you are an opposition politician saying over the next 20 years, what is the Uganda that we see? You must look beyond him. Okay. And to look beyond him requires that even if he may want to use any dialogue to entrench himself, let me tell you, the moment you enter a dialogue, you cannot predetermine its outcome. And I think it is always better to try and fail than fail to try, because we shall always live in this ambiguity, assuming we started a very serious dialogue. Where will it lead us? And there you will need a person with the qualities of a Mandela, a Martin Luther King, to understand that you need to transcend your base. Now, the final one. Again, this book I'm just finishing reading of Obama. And this is a message to my other grandson, Bobi Wine. Bobi Wine, if you can ever get the discipline.
Bobi Wine, I'm older than him, so he should be now the fourth grandson.
Great grandson, okay. If I was Bobi Wine, because I think that Bobi Wine represents the future of Uganda more than Besigye. If I was Bobi Wine, I'd go and read Obama. Obama says that, you see, when I came to run for president, I was a black man. And there are black people in America, they are angry. That system, you see police killing them every day. You know, they constitute 11 or 12% of the US population. They are 46% of the American prison population. America is the largest prison population in the world. It has 5% of the world population, 20% of the world jail prisoners. Just listen to this. Another statistic is there are more African Americans in jail than in college. Do you know that?
Yes.
So they are angry. And Obama understood that I can't be president. All of them are looking to me to be a spokesperson of their grievances. Then there is the white liberal left. They want me to be a spokesperson of their own grievances. But in me becoming that spokesperson of their grievances and expressing their anger, yes, I will solidify them and rally them, but I will not be able to build the necessary broad political coalition that can bring me to victory. So he had to fight them and refuse to be held hostage to their radicalism, to their anger, to their frustrations, in order to reach out to a large cross-section of young white Americans, Hispanics, and other social groups that would help him to come to power. So if you want to build a Uganda, just think Obama style, think Mandela style, think Martin Luther King style. How do I transcend those who are really hurt? Look, the people being kidnapped and killed, that's a very bad thing. People are hurt in Uganda, they are grieving. But in you becoming the spokesperson, you may also undermine your ability to appeal to a larger audience that can bring you to power. And those are the trade-offs that leaders of the opposition in Uganda, especially Bobi Wine, need to think about.
Okay, Sarah, next 5 years, what do you fear? What do you hold as onto, you know, with some hope, optimism? Are they there? What are they? What do you fear most in the next 5 years?
Well, I will give my response on the context of the 10 points program. The key issues in the 10 points program, which is President Museveni's own blueprint.
Yeah.
Number one was democracy.
Yeah.
2, sustainable economy. He still had the word mixed economy somewhere, but the key point is sustainable economy.
That was number 10?
Yes, fighting
the mixed
corruption.
Economy?
Fighting corruption, fighting sectarianism, and
Sectarianism was
building
number
a
4.
professional army. So I want to zero on these 4. If you score him on building democracy, is Uganda more democratic than before he came? There are key tenets of democracy: observance of human rights, rule of law, transparency and accountability, among others. Do we have protection and observance of human rights? His government is being questioned internationally on the issue of human rights. The state has a duty to protect citizens, including those that oppose the regime. We have a character of a state that does not distinguish its role in power as a government that serves everybody and keeps acting as a regime that serves its supporters at the peril of everybody else that does not support that regime. So I think, I wish, no, yes, let me finish, then you. No, let me finish and you come in, because I think I was very keen. No, Andrew, please, you had your time. You can ask a question.
Andrew, what is the problem with the word regime?
No, I will not allow Andrew's interference. He had his time.
Yes.
So I just wish, my dream would be that really President Museveni wakes up and takes serious his own blueprint, the 10 points program, and gives Ugandans what he promised on the steps of parliament as he took his first oath. He's going to take his seventh oath as president, and he's taking that oath at the time when his democratic and human rights credentials are questionable worldwide, and also the country is running into a debt crisis. So my wish really is that he refocuses on the 10 points program and handles the skyrocketing public debt, economic crisis, and we have clear principles in the Public Finance Management Act. The principles of fiscal policy objectives, the Charter of Fiscal Policy Responsibility that the Minister of Finance, in the coming, or whether it's the current one going forward, that must present by 20th August 2021. So what is the fiscal responsibility of this government?
Okay, good. Mr. Gobi, Sarah refers to the economy, but I want to add the 10 steps back that we had, caused by the pandemic, but which we have to discuss in our local situation. COVID, you know, making a mess of a lot of progress that we have made, and it's going to affect us going forward. But it's also, we are finishing 2020 when we are going into almost 50% of the debt to GDP, and all these economic problems that we are entering into the next government. What do you think that this next government, whose manifesto for hope you participated in crafting, should be looking like?
Thank you. I think many people in this country, they think that our fundamental problem in Uganda is politics. I disagree with those people. I think, like many societies everywhere in the world, the fundamental problem of Uganda is political economy. And for that, it's more of having a pre-capitalist society that is masquerading to practice democracy. The pre-capitalist society is full of citizens without coordinated interests. And therefore it becomes so difficult to practice principled democracy when you don't have coordinated interests. I therefore think that the next government should concentrate about 70% of its energies and resources to getting the economy of Uganda transformed so that it can work for the majority of Ugandans, but not for very few people who are now gainfully employed by this economy. Politics, Charles, looks might different when 9 out of 10 people in a country who are outside agriculture are employed in informal, low-paying, risky livelihoods. Either they are riding a border, they are vending some food, they are, you know, doing all sorts of things, preaching on the roadside of a street and so on and so forth. That politics will not work in such a society. I always ask people, why do you think in the world there are those societies where whenever you ask someone who's the leader of that society, they find it difficult to remember them? Like on this panel here, ask them, who's the Prime Minister of Norway, of Netherlands, of Denmark, of Sweden? It will be a struggle to remember those leaders. But if you asked who's the president of US, of UK, who's the mayor of Kampala,
of Russia,
vis-a-vis the mayor of... people will quickly get them. Why? Because those societies, they are always permanently in the news for the wrong reasons. And it's because those societies have economies which were built on the doctrine of working for a few people. Uganda's problem is squarely this. Therefore, the next year, 5 years, the leadership should concentrate more energy on getting the economy transformed to create jobs, productive and decent jobs, as well as wealth for a majority of Ugandans. It is going to be a process, of course, not an event.
Can it be done in the next 5 years?
No.
If you're saying it has not been done in the last 35 years.
The foundation has to get stronger and stronger. Already, there are certain things which have been done, and the right things. We are bridging the infrastructure gap. That now, you can say that Uganda is being opened up in different parts of the country. And investors are getting there because of electricity, because of roads, because of the security we are talking about and so on. Because, you know, an effective state is one which can do 3 things. Number one, you provide public services to the people. Fundamental. And any legitimate state must be capable of doing that. Number two, you keep the citizens in that country safe, wherever they are. And number three, you collect enough taxes, tax revenue, to finance everything that the private sector cannot provide.
Okay.
That's what measures an effective state.
Okay.
All of these other things you are going to discuss, most of them informed by mainly emotions, they tend to be crowded within that. If you don't transform the society such that it can work for so many people, you're in trouble.
Okay, Honorable Katuntu, you are an MP. You have been an MP for the last 15 years?
Oh, no, only 20 years.
Only 20 years.
Only 20
When
years.
he came to Parliament recently in 2001.
Yes. Only recent. And yet,
these voters now.
You are also going to be part of the next 5 years.
Yes. And I'll make only 25.
What are you going to? You are now an independent MP, but you are going to. That's if you are not in cabinet. You are going to face a majority. That's I am passing a message to the appointing authority. He watches this show. And you're going to be facing a government which is, you know, majority by, is it 72%? About 77, I think, NRM. And you will have to really negotiate. In your negotiation to have something for the public, what will you be really negotiating for that needs to be done in these next 5 years, whether Museveni comes back or not in 2026?
First of all, I have been studying the composition of the next parliament. There is a lot of unknown. There is a lot of uncertainty because 70% of the folks coming are new and young. 25% are returnees, but then 50% are actually new. So the first thing is we need to sort of work together and we know what sort of people these are and what is the agenda. That's number one. What is the agenda?
The agenda is working for the common good of the Ugandan.
I am not so sure. I am not so sure. I have worked with so many groups since I joined politics. And I don't have time to discuss the sort of impression I've got with these groups I've been working with. What I think is the biggest challenge the political class has, Andrew mentioned it, I may repeat it because I have suffered it, is extremism. If the group coming either in the, and to me I don't want to emphasize it the way Andrew does because Andrew is looking at the opposition. I'm telling both sides. If both sides are extremists, then you're in trouble. Because you know, you just have a house which is polarized with people pulling away from each other. And that's very dangerous for this house. Yes, please.
Why do I think that Museveni has better control over his group than either Besigye or Bobi Wine? I think the other side, the leaders are more controlled by the group than he is. He can call his house in order and negotiate something. But the other side, I get the sense that they are hostage, they are captured by their radical extremist wing, that they cannot listen.
You can break away. You can break. All of us were once captured, and we broke away. You get it?
Is Dr. Besigye or Bobi Wine in power? Honorable Museveni is in power.
I don't want to debate those. I just want to debate those who are in the house. Because all of us, I was part of the Najana group, Professor that was, and there are things we disagree. And said, no, this can't be. And eventually became, of course, estranged. As you all know, it's public knowledge. Until we said, well, I think we have to let it go. So what I think, the people coming, and this is my message to them, really they should know Uganda does not need extremists. It doesn't. It doesn't take this country forward. And the biggest what I'm having is this race of the head of that institution now. It is again polarizing that institution right at the beginning, so that by the time we are sworn in, we have two camps: the pro Kadaga and the pro Olanya group. And if you start working first of all to bring those, it might take another year or 2 years before you even start on serious business. So I really request my colleagues, really, and even other people who are not members of the House, who are involved in this politics of who choosing who the head of that institution should be, really to play decent politics, and they don't polarize that institution.
Okay. Now we are going to do 1 minute each as we wind up. Let me start with Dr. Lugalambi. Next, you have already indicated what you would want to see, a minimum consensus, if it can be built. But what in terms of the parliament that is coming, what are your thoughts?
I think,
and the way forward.
Because I think I wanted to look at, because the cabinet, I think, is the most visible and consequential political organ that we have. So what I would like to, because over the last decade, we've had this long experiment with pretty much a political cabinet. Can we now experiment with a technocratic cabinet?
You want a technocratic?
I would really want to see more of a technocratic cabinet, or at the minimum to see, because you see, when you talk about a minister, is as a political supervisor, but you have to supervise something that you really, really understand. So I would like to see more of a technocratic cabinet. We've experimented with the political cabinet. I would really, really like to see a more solidly grounded, cabinet that's solidly grounded in policy.
Who wants to talk about corruption? Is there anybody who wants to see next 5 years of Museveni be like Magufuli as far as corruption is concerned? Or we don't, it's a lost cause?
I don't think it is. You see, it depends on that house. First of all, you are going to constitute accountability committees. The Auditor General reports come to those committees. And then how will these members take their job seriously? Once they do that, then President Museveni will certainly be taking decisions based on a vibrant parliament, because he has done it before. Yeah. So to me, I think if the parliament takes its job seriously, accountability committees, and even other members of parliament, you have a group that is ready to fight corruption, then I think Museveni will take the lead.
Okay, Andrew, there is someone called Kurax. He says, Charles, thanks for the show. Can Mwenda confirm if Museveni, that President Museveni as well, is not also a hostage of NRM members who are also fanatics?
That's what I said. I think that Museveni has better control. He's a hostage of his own power, partly, but he has better control over his group, and he can direct it to a particular end that he wants more than his... even Muntu has better control over his group and can direct it. But I think that the biggest culprits are Kizza Besigye and Bobi when they come, because rather people power and defiance are from the same stable. Let me talk about what I think about the next government.
In 1 minute.
Yes. I think that the next 5 years are going to be very slow and tedious in Uganda. Let us remember that President Museveni at an individual level is not growing young. He has grown old. I think he's intellectually exhausted. He's ideologically significantly weakened. He doesn't have the energy and zest to drive government. People have to recognize that. And the way the system has evolved, he does not have people around him whom he trusts, to whom he can delegate power. So Power is concentrated in his hands and he cannot exercise it at the speed and effectiveness that you would expect. He was doing in 86 or 96 or 2006. If it took him one day to make a decision in 86, it took him 1 week to make it in 96, it took him 1 month to make it in 2006, it took him 1 year to make it in 2016, it will take him forever to make it this time. That is one risk. The second thing, that Parliament is going to be polarized, quarrelsome, and interested in recouping the money they spent in the campaigns. It will be difficult to pass things. 3, you talked about corruption. First of all, I think that our obsession with corruption is the problem rather than corruption itself. In any case, from my understanding, corruption is the way the system here works, not the way it fails. I am willing to be hanged. I think if you remove the corruption from the body politic of Uganda, this country and the state called Uganda would disintegrate. I don't know. Let me give you an example.
First, Andrew.
Yeah, let me give you an example, Charles.
Yes.
Members of parliament, they sold their houses,
to poison the public,
borrowed the money to run elections.
Gobi is accusing you of having
Yes, but me, I want to speak of
delivering misinformation.
Misinformation on national TV.
And is inciting me that it is not a public good, that I should not allow you to. But Andrew, I will allow you to exercise your right.
Because me, I am interested in Ugandans relating to the reality, not a moral faith. Rather, this is a political reality. Practically every member of parliament, and there would be my witness, many members of parliament have taken dates. In this last parliament that is ending, 50% are not receiving their salaries. All they go directed to date. 75% receive less than 50% of their salaries. So you've spent 2 billion in the campaign. You want to recoup it.
Andrew, let me give you some information.
Let me just finish. Let me finish. I just want to finish.
Okay.
My suspicion is, and let me tell you, this is not about Uganda, it's about every democratic country you can imagine, including the United States. I don't know about Nordic countries I know. So members of parliament will go there to lobby, become ministers, so they can steal and recoup their money, or, not all of them, but most of them, or sit on powerful, influential oversight committees where they can be able to get bribes from public officials who come to negotiate for them. Bribes. I do not know how else you can run a democracy in a poor country like this, where exchange of material favors and corruption is not the rule. The final thing I want to say is India, the most everlasting democracy in a poor setting. There is a report by the Carnegie Endowment about the last election in India of 2016 or 2015. And they said of the 2,100 candidates for parliament, the parliament is 600, 700, which is 1/3, 33%, had a criminal record. Out of the 600, yes, out of the 600, 164 who were elected with criminal charges in court.
When they had
of
been
those,
even
33 were elected from a jail.
Yeah.
In fact, the study is called When Crime Pays, and they show that a candidate for parliament with a criminal record in India has 3 times more chances of being re-elected than one who is clean. So the more you enter democratic politics in a poor country, the more you're likely to promote because democracy is ruled by money. Okay. People look for money and they look it by corrupt ways. So to say that you are going to fight corruption is very good. It makes people feel good. Like when you say people are going to go to heaven, people feel good even if they die and they don't get anywhere.
Okay.
So to say that Uganda
two are not the same examples, though. You wanted to give him an information.
And I think many Ugandans speak like Andrew is, and I'm surprised that Andrew does that because he's a man of statistics and figures. Andrew, I want you to do a study of the MPs that have come and see how many of them have houses even. The 80% I can vote of the MPs who have been elected, none of them is worth 300-400 million shillings. None. So when is this thing you're telling they sold? Nothing. These are just poor young men and women below 40 who have made it to parliament. If you are talking about the MPs who sold their houses and so on after they lost, all the people coming,
the outgoing
MPs. Yes.
Thank you.
So that argument falls on its.
Thank you.
Just there and there.
So whatever you have said is wrong. Now,
It's wrong. And let me make this point.
Okay.
Because you see, if you say that all people have been selling their houses and so on, who? These are just poor young men and women who have now come and give them an opportunity. You guys talk to them, let their parties build them, and so on. The so-called big fellows who sold houses, I can tell you they all lost.
Perhaps maybe what we should do, though, without weakening Mwenda's point, is that
Why
the
are
point
you
he's
protecting
making
the point?
is about the desperation of the incoming MPs and the fact that they are going to be gullible, vulnerable to taking any kind of deal that will come their way. I think that point should be left to stand.
But just before, you know that when there is collapse of rule of law, then the abnormality and the wrongs become the norm. And I don't think that's a culture we need to promote in this country.
Okay.
Let me
Good.
tell you.
Finally. And by the way, we are not supposed to allow you now to make a point. Gentlemen and lady, it is his birthday. And as behind the headlines, we want to congratulate you. As a young child, we don't have to allow you to make your last point. What did you want to say? You were happy birthday to you. And as the team of Behind the Headlines prepared for you some good cake.
Thank you so much.
And can they present it here? And for us, we do all our things live.
But before you bribe me with the cake, let me first tell you why corruption is terrible.
In 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds. And I was chosen to go to Chankwanza and I speak to these members of parliament who are going to be the majority on this very subject of corruption.
What did
and
you
I
tell
told
them?
I left them with 5 messages. And I want to summarize them quickly. I told them, number 1, that parliament is the last fortress against corruption.
Yes. 2.
If MPs themselves become corrupt, then the battle against corruption is lost at the start.
2.
And they clapped. They said they are going to
They clapped on the point, not on the action they will take.
No, they said they will never take a bribe.
Okay.
Now, 2,
they said they will never take bribes.
The political economy of corruption is such that most Ugandans now think it is the biggest impediment to the transformation of the country socially, economically, and politically. 3, religion and democracy are no guarantee against corruption. Religious societies have been found more corrupt than non-religious ones.
4th,
there is now a new and more dangerous type of corruption. And this is the one which fights good people, particularly those who decline the invitation to join the corruption cartels. And they should watch out for that. And lastly, that research is showing only audit institutions, effective budget tracking, e-government, e-procurement, and curbing illicit financial flow, they are the only practical ways of fighting corruption. Everything else, they are just...
Why didn't you also tell them that about 77.4% of their colleagues in the 10th Parliament failed, and the suspicion is that largely so because they went against interest of their voters, so that they keep knowing that in their mind.
That one I told them in the detail. I was telling you the key messages.
Okay.
Unless you give me more time and I tell you.
No, we have to give you cake. Can someone deliver? My producers have cake, and they should present it here. And you sanitize and do the needful on the cake, and you distribute to the panel members.
You don't have a knife.
They have.
First, take a picture of my cake. Have you taken
Andrew, what do you think he would have used?
Because you wanted the man to use his fingers that sanitize.
A nice cake there, Viewer, today is Gobi's birthday, and we want him to celebrate it with all of you.
The song.
The song?
Thank you very much.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Gideon Ramadan. Happy birthday to you.
This is the first birthday I've celebrated.
Oh, so thanks to Behind the Headlines. I think we are going to stop at that, and the rest of you out there, we just invited you to join us by watching. We are not going to have enough cake to distribute to all of you. Thanks to Dr. George Lugalambi. Thanks to Andrew Mujuni Mwenda. Thanks to Sarah Birete. Thanks so much to the birthday boy, Gobi Ramadan, and to Honorable Abdu Katuntu. Thanks so much for the comeback, and hoping that we will have you again next week and the weeks going ahead. Thank you, and from the producers, thanks a lot, and the technical team, but most especially to you out there who watches this show. Keep it behind the headlines and keep watching this place. Bye-bye.
Welcome to English in a Minute. This is a weasel. These wild animals are small and tricky.